Tonight's True Scary Story is probably the most terrifying haunting I have ever covered. It is about the Smurl family. This is one of the most vicious hauntings to ever be recorded in American history. I do have to give a trigger warning for sexualized violence, and it does get pretty heavy at times. Before we get started, if you could just do me a huge favor and smash that like button, I would really appreciate it. This did take a lot of work for me, so if you appreciate my work, I would appreciate it if you would like it. Thank you so much. Jack and Janet Smurl were a happy couple living in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. Jack worked full-time and Janet was a stay-at-home mother. They had a great life until, unfortunately, one day in 1972, Hurricane Agnes struck and destroyed their home. Jack did try to rebuild their home and fix the damages, but unfortunately it would be taken over by the Housing Development Authority. Because of this, they decided to move to West Pittston, Pennsylvania on 33 Chase Street. It was a duplex. They didn't see any reason to break up their family. They were very close with Jack's parents, John and Mary, and they wanted to live close together. So John and Mary purchased a duplex and then rented out the other half of the duplex to Jack and Janet at a discounted rate. What they didn't know about this house is that there was rumors going around that this was the town's haunted house. The police would often be called there for disturbances, even when nobody was there. Some say that the previous tenants that lived there practiced witchcraft. Other people would say that they saw faces in the windows. Some homes caved in due to the town being a mining spot previously. It got better since the 1940s, but many homes were affected, and people would be surprised when these homes caved in to find pick bones. These pick bones were found deep inside the mud surrounding the properties. Jack and Janet quickly became prominent members of society. Jack got a promotion and coached his daughter's softball team. Janet volunteered at the local high school. The daughters were also doing well, but no one told them about their house being a little strange. The first odd occurrence happened in the mid-1970s when Mary Smurl purchased a rug for their half of the duplex. When they rolled the rug out, they noticed a large greasy stain underneath it. It was still wet, so this seemed off to them, but Mary and John cleaned it and went to bed. A couple days later, they would come home from being out and realize that the stain reappeared again. This would continue to happen. The renovations were pretty significant with the house, and it would take the Smurls years to complete. During this time, the rug would not be the only unexplainable experience they would face while changing things around. Pipes were replaced and repaired, and even after being freshly soldered, they would spring a leak, soaking Jack and Janet's home. And Jack was an experienced welder, so this was strange to them. Things would be placed in one place and then disappear and reappear in other places. Jack and Janet also remodeled their entire bathroom. They renovated the whole entire thing. They went to bed. The next day they woke up and the sink and bathtub had been completely scratched beyond repair, with large chunks ripped out of the porcelain. Then the fires started. In 1974, Jack was on the couch watching TV when all of a sudden, the TV burst into flames right in front of his eyes. The same thing happened to Jack's car, getting rid of any thought that it may just be an electrical issue in the home. Then their daughter Dawn started coming into their room at night because she was too scared to sleep in her own room. After a while, Jack was concerned and asked his daughter, "What is going on? Why do you keep coming into our room?" And Dawn replied with, "I keep seeing people floating around my room." Jack would go and check and obviously couldn't find anything. And they also couldn't find anything wrong with the home, with plumbers and electricians coming there and checking everything out. Still, nothing. No one could find anything wrong with this home. Now, normally they would be able to dismiss Dawn's appearances in their room because she was scared as just a child's imagination, but other things were happening in their home, so they couldn't do that. Things like radios turning on full blast, footsteps heard upstairs, toilets flushing on their own in the middle of the night, and banging heard from inside the walls. In 1977, Janet gave birth to twins. One morning, Jack and Janet woke up to a strange creaking sound. They walked outside to see their lawn chairs creaking back and forth on the porch. Jack and Janet almost came to terms with the fact that there was something in their home besides them. This would go on for years, and despite it being eerie, nothing dangerous had happened. happened. So they would joke about sharing their home with a ghost, but didn't actually believe it. But one night, Jack woke up to his shoulders being caressed. Thinking it was his wife Janet and doing it in a loving manner, he rolled over, a bit excited, realizing that Janet was fast asleep. Then foul smells started appearing in their home, like very distinct foul smells that were terrible. John and Mary would be on their side of the duplex and they would hear Jack and Janet fighting so badly that they were actually worried about Janet's safety because of the fights escalating to a point where Jack would be screaming and yelling at Janet. Things would be thrown around. It got to the point where Jack's father had had enough of hearing this commotion, and he had enough of hearing his son talk to Janet like this, and he was also concerned for Janet's safety. So was Mary. So one day, after just completely having enough of this, he walks over there, storms in, opens the door to see Jack and Janet and their family just safely, silently, happily watching TV on the couch. They had not been fighting at all. They had never been fighting. All of those fights that they had heard for months at this point they never occurred. Then one day, Janet is standing in her kitchen ironing clothes when a blast of cold air hits her. Now it was February, so it wasn't that odd, but to have a blast of cold air hit you like that in your home freaked her out a little bit. But what really scared her is when she looks over and sees a human-like shape. It's forming like the shape of a person. Its body is made of a black-like smoke substance. Janet got the sense it was looking back at her, but she couldn't see its face. They stared at each other for minutes. It moved towards her. There was something fluttering behind it, a cape. Then all of a sudden, the creature was on top of Janet. It passed through her into the living room. Janet was so terrified, she ran over to John and Mary's. She opens the door and she sees Mary sitting on a chair. She's just staring into nothingness. She's not talking. She didn't acknowledge her at all. Now, this wasn't that odd because Mary had been suffering from some health issues. So at first, Janet just thought maybe she wasn't feeling well. But then Mary looks up at her and says, "You're gonna think I'm crazy, but I just saw a black figure walk through the hallway and go into your house." After this, Mary and Janet started having disturbing encounters to what they believe were phantom imposters or doppelgangers. These entities would assume the identities of the two women and maliciously discord with the family. Mary would claim to hear Janet shouting and cursing, where her own imposter would yell Janet's name. This just created an atmosphere of dread and confusion. But then after a little while of this, it just became peaceful. And so they thought that maybe their minds were just playing tricks on them. Till one evening, Janet was ironing Kim's communion dress. Janet and Kim suddenly hear this crackling noise when suddenly a 4-foot lighting fixture falls to the ground and hits young Shannon in the forehead. Thankfully, she wasn't seriously injured. When Jack went to see what happened, it appeared that the light had been ripped from its place. The ceiling was incredibly damaged, and young Shannon had a gouge on her forehead. A few days later, Janet takes the girls school clothes shopping, and Jack is home falling asleep. When suddenly, he wakes up and he just feels off. Then he realizes that he is floating 2 feet in the air. He began to struggle, and then he was just dropped on the bed again, like nothing happened. The physical activity would get worse one evening in the summer of 1985. Just moments after Jack and Janet were done making love, Janet was grabbed by her foot and pulled by something all the way to the end of the bed. Jack grabs his wife's hand, desperately trying to pull her back towards the bed, when as suddenly as it started, it just stops. The banging on the wall started up again, but louder than ever, and then the smell returned. Whatever tried to take Janet in that moment was angry that it was unsuccessful. The family didn't know who to turn to. They had put so much money into the home. Moving was not an option. They also built a life there. They didn't want to leave, but things were getting so much worse. One day, the dog was lifted from the ground and thrown into the kitchen door. One night, Jack and Janet wake up to a loud crash. Their daughter was at the bottom of the stairs and they didn't know how she got there. Then one night, Janet is sleeping. When she wakes up, she has this eerie feeling. Then she looks in the corner of her room and there's this black shadow. She's absolutely terrified. She tries to wake Jack up. He will not wake up. No matter what she does, shake him, yell his name, he is not waking up. This also started happening to Jack, so something was keeping the other one asleep while the other one was up being tormented. Then one night, smoke appeared, forming into a person, the shape of a person, and this happened a few nights in a row. Mary and John were also experiencing terrifying things. Mary complained that her mattress levitated off the bed. After she was levitated, she would drop to the floor and injured her leg. Janet started reading about the paranormal. Priests came to bless the house. It would go away for a little bit and then come back later, tenfold. Then Janet was introduced by a friend of hers to a university professor who was interested in the paranormal. Janet then met with the man who told her that his interest in the topic was purely academic. While he couldn't help her with a solution, he knew two people who could. And this is when they were introduced to Ed and Lorraine Warren. So one day they meet with Ed and Lorraine Warren, and Ed starts asking them pretty aggressively, interrogating questions like if they've ever dabbled in the occult, played with Ouija boards, or if they were Satanists. The whole ordeal felt a little intense, but the Smurls pushed it to the side because this was the first time someone was actually helping them. While Ed was doing this, Lorraine and another psychic moved throughout the home. They said they sensed fear. They found themselves down by the wardrobe in the Smurls' bedroom. As soon as they walked into that room, they were hit by a strong smell. The same one that had plagued the Smurls for years. They had a strong sense that something was hiding in the wardrobe. Both psychics were filled with the sense of evil. Lorraine said that she could sense 4 spirits in the house. One was an elderly woman that seemed very confused, but appeared to be harmless. Another spirit, a young woman, insane and violent. The third was a man with a mustache, capable of violence. But the fourth spirit wasn't a spirit at all. It was a demon that seemed to be controlling the other spirits and had likely been on the property for a very long time. For some reason, it was awakened by the Smurl family, and it would feed off the Smurls' fear and confusion. The more fear they showed, the more energy it gave the demon. See, now this is why I always say, try your best not to show fear when you feel entities like this. It's so crucial. And I'm saying that right now. This isn't part of the story. After going over this, Ed went over the 4 stages of demonic activity: infestation, oppression, possession, and then finally, death. And unfortunately, these 4 stages were already well underway. The Warrens' investigation began that very night, and it did not take long for them to start experiencing the same things that the Smurls were experiencing. Mirrors in their bedroom began moving unexpectedly. TVs were unplugged in fear that they would light up in fire. Suddenly, the TV lights up and there's static on the screen. They swear they see figures that are just staring back at them, like they're inside of the TV, staring back at them. The Warrens told the Smurls that praying was the answer to all of their problems, and to go out and buy holy water and sprinkle it around their house while praying. The Warrens would investigate for months on end, apparently gathering all sorts of photographic evidence and recorded evidence, but this was never made public or never shown to anybody. The Warrens were trying to get the local church involved to perform an exorcism on the property, something that would involve the Scranton Diocese to get involved in the case. The night the Warrens left, the children were huddled in their room in fear of the fact that they would see the gray thing that they had been seeing at night, and it would return. Janet was getting slapped repeatedly. The banging on the walls was getting worse. The TV was glowing with strange images hidden within. By 3 a.m., the activity began to calm down. Jack and Simon the dog were patrolling the house, making sure everything was safe, and the dog would not leave the hallway near the young girl's bedroom. The Smurls purchased several items from a church shop and then took them to a priest to get blessed. They did this because Ed Warren told them to do this. Now, the priest was hesitant, but he did it anyway. Now, the church didn't seem to be taking the Smurls' experiences seriously, and this was likely because of the involvement of Ed and Lorraine Warren. Days later, Janet is at home taking a bath, when suddenly she feels like she's being watched. It got worse when the whistling started, but the type of whistling that you hear when someone is catcalling a woman. That night, Jack wakes up at 2 a.m. to hearing 2 female voices. He opens his eyes and he sees 2 females standing at the foot of his bed. They were wearing old-fashioned dresses, but then they just suddenly vanished. Then the following night, Jack wakes up again to hearing the females' voices, but this time, when he opens his eyes, he sees these two females standing in the corner of his room. He tried waking up Janet, but again, to no luck. He then was just staring at the women. He could tell one of them was in their 40s, and the other one was a younger girl, possibly in her early 20s. He could see them whispering to each other. The younger woman slowly turned to face Jack, her lips widening into an exaggerated smile. Jack tried to scream, but no noise would come out. The two women continued whispering to each other, and then looked at him and grinned at him in a way that sent chills down his spine. Then they slowly disappeared into the wardrobe. The Warrens stayed in touch with the Smurls and made regular visits, and Ed actually got another priest to come bless the house. Shortly after this, Ed decided to attempt something called religious provocation. I hope I'm pronouncing that word right. A ritual that he hoped would force the supposed demon to reveal itself. It appeared to work to some degree, because halfway through it, Ed was choked so severely that he nearly became unconscious. Then started the bite and scratch marks on the family. First Jack, and then the other members of the family. It would just appear overnight. On the other side of the duplex, Mary saw a darkened shadow in her doorway one night. She got the sense that it was calling her to follow it into the darkness. Things were already really bad, but they jumped to a whole new level on the evening of June 21st. Jack was jolted awake violently. He looked around the room and didn't see anything until he noticed something at the end of his bed. It was some type of thing that resembled a woman. It had a much older looking woman's raggedy face, a younger woman's body. Her hair was long, white, and messy. Her skin pure white, and what appeared to be scales covering her body. She also appeared to have scars or sores that were oozing pus. The inside of her mouth was green. Her eyes were red. She had several missing teeth. The teeth that she did have were long and vampire-like. She climbed on Jack while he was totally paralyzed. Janet lay next to him in a paralyzed, trance-like state. He realized that the creature on top of him was having sex with him. While she was doing this, she was staring at him, smiling, a demented, crooked smile. Once she was done with him, she slowly crawled backwards off the bed and retreated back into the darkness. Soon after Jack could move, he realized that he was covered in a smelly, sticky substance, the same that appeared to be oozing off the woman's body. Jack scrubbed himself in the shower so hard he nearly bled. He could normally pass this off as sleep paralysis or a hallucination, but the fact that she left disgusting remnants of whatever was oozing off of her body on him, and the fact that his body was sore and ached kind of disproved that theory, or those theories. The following morning at breakfast, Dawn told her parents about the night that she had. She had seen what happened to her father in her dreams. This is horrifying that his daughter saw this disgusting display of torture. Ugh. Jack contacted the Scranton Diocese again after his attack and begged them for help. But once again, they were not taken seriously from the church. Soon after this, Janet became victim of sexual attacks that had been happening in their home to Jack. She reported being sexually assaulted by an unseen force. They didn't go as far as what happened to Jack, but it was still a disgusting form of violation. One of the Warrens' team relayed this story to the Warrens over the phone, and then proceeded to play them a recording that he had made. It was the familiar banging that they had been hearing inside the walls. But in between the banging was the unmistakable sound of pigs squealing. With the local church not willing to help, the Warrens brought in Father McKenna, Father Robert McKenna to be exact, from Connecticut. He would come to perform what would be the first of several exorcisms in that house. The night before he arrived, however, Jack was then again visited by the two women that night. Only this time, they brought a middle-aged man with them. This middle-aged man got right up in Jack's face while Jack was paralyzed and said,
"You will pay for this."
He repeated this phrase several times while the women continued to whisper to each other and even laugh and smirk at Jack's terror. Jack just lay there, helpless, until they slowly retreated back into the darkness. The activity was seemingly unsuccessful, although it did lighten in severity for a while. and was reduced to a more type of behavior that you would see in a poltergeist case. Everyone in that house kept falling ill. Ed Warren even fell ill before the exorcism. Then their daughter, Catherine, fell ill after the exorcism was performed, losing several pounds. She also had a very high fever, terrifying Jack and Janet until the fever finally broke. The sexual experiences that Jack and Janet began to experience took them to a whole new level of terror. When their 16-year-old daughter, Dawn, started experiencing the attacks herself. Dawn was in the shower one day when she heard the familiar bangings inside the walls, which barely affected her at this point due to the commonality of it. She climbed in to wash herself when she suddenly felt something forcefully grab her arm, and then began to slowly stroke the other one before grabbing both of her arms and holding them tighter and tighter, and now had her backed against the wall in the shower. She threw herself out of the shower, falling down on the ground and screaming for her parents' help. The family on both sides of the duplex were experiencing bite marks and slash marks on their bodies. Apparitions continued to show up. Jack was watching TV one night when he saw a young man who looked about to be in his early 20s with long, dark hair. He saw him staring across the room at him with this terrifying smile on his face. Janet was in the bathtub one night when a 3-foot-tall humanoid creature began to materialize in front of her eyes. The same sores that were oozing, the same pus that the woman had had on her body that assaulted Jack. Mary Smurl was regularly haunted by a black shadow figure, and Jack kept waking up levitating and then being thrown violently against the wall. The haunting was beginning to be too much for the family, so they packed up all of their belongings, they put it in a camper van, and they headed to a camping ground in Honesdale, hoping the trip would relieve them of everything that was going on in the house. Unfortunately, this would not be the case. At approximately 9:15 the next night, Jack Smurl was starting a fire and their dog Simon was laying next to it. Something caught the dog's attention. He jumped up, stiffened, and instantly started growling. Jack followed the dog's line of sight into some nearby bushes, and staring back at him was a young girl. She looked to be about 14 years old, and she was smiling at him with this disturbing, unsettling smile. It looked forced, but familiar. Jack noticed that she was also wearing an old-fashioned colonial dress. She didn't move, blink, she just kept smiling, and then vanished in thin air. Jack then creeps closer to the bushes. The girl then materializes again, and then just disappears into thin air. Later that night, the family made a campfire. The sounds of cries from a young girl could be heard in the night surrounding them. They looked everywhere for where these cries were coming from before realizing that whatever was in their home had followed them to the campground and could follow them anywhere. Back at the Smurls' residence, the neighbors reported hearing screams coming from the house, although they weren't home. Other times the family was away, the neighbors reported hearing massive flocks of birds surrounding the house. One neighbor even called the Smurls, convinced that someone had to be home making these sounds. When she did, a young girl picked up. It wasn't a familiar voice, so the neighbor asked, "Who is this?" On the other line, the young girl just laughs. The young girl just laughed maliciously, and then the phone line went dead. She tried calling again, and no one answered. As soon as the family got home, activity picked up again. Multiple members of the family reported levitating in the middle of the night. It didn't stop at their home though. Jack's work colleagues reported strange occurrences happening at the office. They were all aware of what was going on in Jack's home, and the same smell that lingered in the Smurls' home lingered in Jack's office. Phones started making deafening loud buzzing noises, and then they reported hearing banging from coming inside of a radio. One man was convinced that there was somebody stuck inside of that radio. Not long after the camping trip, Janet lay down on the sofa because she had a throbbing headache. She awoke to the familiar experience of something unseen sexually assaulting her. Someone's hand seemed to move up her body before they clasped around her throat, tightening its grip so tight she was losing her vision. The dog attempted to lunge at the attacker, but just passed right through it. Janet started using the religious visual techniques that the Warren had taught her, and this actually made the entity slowly retreat away. The following day, Father McKenna returned for the second exorcism. When he left that day, he just knew he still wasn't able to help that family. Janet was getting the worst of it every single night, mostly in the bed or in the bathroom. The entity seemed to like to attack the family whenever they were most vulnerable. So in the bathroom, naked, in the shower, in the bed alone. One night, after Janet had unfortunately been sexually assaulted by an entity again, she saw the apparition of an older woman standing at the end of her bed. Except for the first time ever, it did not seem evil. It felt peaceful and like the woman was trying to tell her something. After a while, the Smurls decided that they were going to go public with this, and they were going to take part in a studio interview, but they were going to do this anonymously. They didn't want anyone else to know who they were, but they were hoping that the church would see it and help them finally. The Warrens repeatedly told the Smurls that while Father McKenna was a respected practitioner of the exorcism rites, having their church send their priests from the higher ups would hopefully be more successful in driving back the demonic forces that were plaguing their family. But the plan to go public seemed to anger the demon. While they were on their way to the studio, they were actually almost shoved off of the road by an unseen force. When they finally showed up at the interview, they were in bad shape. Neither of them slept a wink over the night. Their bed was shaking violently in the hotel room. While the interview went well, when they got home, the activity in the home intensified even further. Janet was attacked in the night so viciously that it felt like the spirit was trying to break her arms and legs. Jack had also experienced something terrifying. Jack was awoken in the middle of the night by a strange breathing sound. When he finally opened his eyes, he saw something terrifying standing in front of him. It was 8 feet tall, standing on its hind legs with a furry head and a pig's snout. It had red eyes and it was waving its long, raky fingers at Jack as it came towards him. Jack screamed as loud as he could, actually waking Janet up this time. Janet looked at her husband and realized that although this thing had disappeared before she could see it, whatever he had seen had broken him. Just days later, Janet saw a man with a mustache with animal horns protruding from his head. They rarely slept anymore. They were a mess. Janet and Jack rarely slept, and Jack's parents' health was rapidly deteriorating. The same beast creature that Jack saw returned a little while later. One night, he woke up to use the bathroom. He walked into the bathroom, he flicked on the bathroom light, and this is when he saw it. It was squealing as it did so. Jack ran out of the bathroom and into the bedroom, and this thing chased him while squealing like a pig and cornered him in the corner of his bedroom. Jack closed his eyes, praying that he wasn't going to die. Then when he opened him, the thing was gone. After this, late one morning, Janet was laying in bed when she felt something grab the back of her neck. Although she was laying on her back on the bed, she looks over and she sees a hand protruding from the bed. It was a human hand poking up from the mattress. Things would get so much worse, and then it started involving their children even more so. One day, Janet runs upstairs because she hears her daughter screaming at the top of her lungs. When she got there, she found her daughter sitting on the floor, crying, saying that there was a man taking toys out of her toy box. She said that this was not the first time that he had been there, and that he had smelled terrible. Obviously terrified for her daughter's safety, Janet asked Shannon if the man had ever hurt her, and fortunately she said no, that he just scared her because he would just stand there and stare at her. The Warrens and the Smurls came up with a plan to contact the press. They did this because no one was helping them. After this, the attacks got even more severe than they already had. Jack was assaulted again by a revolting woman. This time, it took on the form of a more attractive girl in a human form. The only thing that gave away what it was her red eyes. The Smurls contacted a reporter named Sandy Underwood. They didn't realize that this would cause such a media frenzy worldwide. What they thought would be their chance to help actually backfired. Hundreds of people would show up at their house, all in hopes to see activity. The neighbors were angry, the children were startled. At one point, a coven of witches showed up and asked to perform rituals in their home. People even showed up carrying weapons and climbing up trees to look inside the house. A psychic named Betty Ann Moore got in touch with the family, and she actually identified some of the same spirits that Lorraine Warren had. She was also able to provide some info that seemed to fill in some holes and explain the behavior of the entities in the home. She said that the old woman's name was Abigail and appeared to be harmless, like Lorraine Warren said. Upstairs, she sensed the spirit of a man named Patrick, a large man with a mustache, who had died there. He used to beat his young wife. Her name was Elizabeth. One day, he came home to find Elizabeth cheating on him. He beat the man to death and strangled Elizabeth to death. She said that Janet looked like Elizabeth, and so Patrick was mistaking Janet for Elizabeth and Jack for her lover. She exclaimed that Patrick wouldn't cross over because he was afraid he would be punished for everything that he had done in his life. She also mentioned that the violent and insane woman that Lorraine Warren had mentioned wanted to cause the family harm. She was also working alongside a demon in the house with the intention to possess a member of their family. She was able to persuade Patrick to commit violent acts, while the demon was everywhere in the home. It had manifested everywhere in that home. 6 different neighbors exclaimed to be experiencing banging on their walls, screaming late at night, and foul odors in their home. They think that this started happening because they contacted the media. So instead of that helping them, it was actually working against them. The Warrens came up with an idea to hold a mass exorcism, with multiple prayer groups being held in the home and across other locations, hoping that if they focused their energy with prayer, that they would get rid of the evil that was in their home. This is when the Scranton Diocese finally stepped in, telling the Warrens that they would be taking over the investigation from here on out. Father McKenna returned for the 3rd exorcism, and for days afterwards, family friends came into their home, and also members of the church, all in an attempt to drown out the evil in prayer. The Smurls finally felt like they were getting some support, and for a few weeks it seemed to work. But then 2 weeks before Christmas, Jack was alone in his living room watching TV. He went to turn off the TV to go up to his bedroom when he saw it. He saw the black caped figure with no face that Janet had seen when she was ironing the clothes the first time that she had seen an apparition, the one that walked through her while she was ironing. Except for this time something was different. It was like this entity was calling him, but not calling him physically, calling him telepathically, just to come closer. Jack resisted, almost coming closer. Then the haunting started all over again, terrifying the family. Now, eventually, a movie and a book was released called The Haunted. It was about the Smurls. And because of this movie and this book, they were finally in a financial position to leave the home and leave all of this disaster behind them. It's said that afterwards, the church ended up finally going into the house after they left and performed an exorcism. And the new tenants that now live there have reported no paranormal activity. This actually affected the youngest daughter, Karen, so much that she became a paranormal investigator later on in life. And that's the end of the story. What do you guys think about this? First of all, that was absolutely terrifying. There's a couple things that I want to talk about here. The involvement of Ed and Lorraine Warren. I sometimes wonder, and please don't get mad at me for saying this, I sometimes wonder, every time they seem to do an investigation, they get the media involved every single time. Sometimes they do it behind the backs of the people they're helping, and sometimes they just try to convince the people they're helping to do it, and it oftentimes backfires on the family. Now, I am not saying that Ed and Lorraine Warren are bad people. I don't know them personally, so I can't really speak about them. I used to actually really like Ed and Lorraine Warren, but I have done a lot of research just from making these videos, and I have to say that I've come across some things that really turned me off about them, and that's really unfortunate because of how much I used to like them. So I would have to do more research, and in order to have a solid opinion about it, but it does make me wonder, and I was wondering what your guys' thoughts are on Ed and Lorraine Warren. And what do you guys think about this case? This has got to be one of the most terrifying cases I have ever covered or I have ever heard. It's so disturbing and violent, and all the sexual abuse, that is insane. The levitating, the being thrown against the wall, being physically harmed, that blows my mind. I wonder what it was about the Smurls that awakened whatever entity was in this home, this demon or whatever it was. It makes you wonder, because obviously previous tenants didn't experience it. The tenants afterwards didn't experience it, but the church also went in, and there was multiple exorcisms performed before the church even went in to finally exorcise the home. But it just makes you wonder, right? What do you guys think about that? I want to know all your thoughts and opinions on this case. But with that being said, you guys, I am now going to go into my favorite part, which is the shout outs. My first shout out is going to Robert Shepard 4080. You said that you listen to my stories every weekend while you're at work, and you left such a supportive comment. I appreciate you so much. Thank you so much for being supportive, and thank you for watching my stories and being a little part of this community. It means the absolute world to me, and I wouldn't have this channel without people like you. I will say this all the time because it is so true. Thank you so much. I love you. My second shout out is going to Lulu George 6635. This story was for you. You wanted longer stories, so I gave you a longer story. Thank you for commenting. Thank you for supporting me. Thank you for wanting longer content from me, because that shows that you like my work. I appreciate you so much, and I really hope that you enjoyed this story, okay? I do. I hope you enjoyed it. So thank you again. It means so much to me. I love you. And with that being said, my name is Kaisa, and I tell true scary stories on here every 3 nights. This time it wasn't every 3 nights because I was doing a really, really long one. Sometimes when I do super, super long ones, it may be longer than 3 nights, but I'm giving you guys what you want. So let me know if that's okay, and let me know if you guys would prefer way longer stories and for me to do it less often, or if you want the shorter stories more often. Please drop that in the comments. But what I was saying was, my name is Kaisa, and I tell true scary stories on here that you guys submit to me. So if you're into that, hit that subscribe button so that you can get notified next time I tell a true scary story. And I just need you to do 3 things for me. And what are those? I need you to keep sending me your scary stories. I need you to have a safe night. And what's the third one? Say it with me. Have a spooky night. Love you guys so much. See you in the next one. Spooky kisses and haunted hugs.